Hello, thank you for listening to the Moist Boys Reviews. This is Josh. I just wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Anchor.fm app. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Moist Boys Reviews. My name is Josh. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the film 1917. It was released limited back around Christmas time, but is just now released in theaters wide, so everyone will have a chance to see it, including myself. The film is directed by Sam Mendes, co-written by Sam Mendes and Christy Wilson Cairns. The film is about two soldiers, played by Joel McKay as Corporal Schofield and Dean Charles Chapman as Corporal Blake. You might recognize Dean Charles Chapman from Game of Thrones. There are a couple of Game of Thrones alumni in this film. The story of 1917 is simple enough, and even if I were to explain it beat by beat here in this review, which I'm not going to do, it would still not alter the experience of seeing this film in the theaters, which I would definitely recommend. Spoiler for my final score at the end. But I would definitely recommend seeing this in theaters. It is definitely something to be experienced. In addition to our two main stars, there are several cameos by fairly popular British actors, including Colin Firth, who gives a fine enough performance. None of the performances are too flashy, except for one particular one, which would be Andrew Scott, who is great as always, brings a little bit of levity to a situation that otherwise does not have it. In addition to that, you have Mark Strong, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Richard Madden are the recognizable names. If you are, if you have seen Game of Thrones or any of the other films, Benedict Cumberbatch probably the biggest name of those. Not necessarily cameos, but small important roles that fill out the cast of characters in the film. For those of you, I'm sure most of you are aware that the main story around this movie is that it was filmed to look like took place in one continuous take. That's not entirely accurate. There is a moment where things kind of shift slightly, and so it is essentially two uncut continuous shots that kind of take the film from one end of the battlefield to the other. In that way, I think in this film it does not feel like a gimmick, but in fact gives a kind of urgency to the film, since you know that everything that will appear on camera has to come from off camera. So there will never be a time when the camera will cut away to an establishing shot of another character. So during the times when the two main characters end up behind enemy lines, that gives it there's a level of tension there, that you know that whatever is happening, if you can't see it in front of you, it can still come from off screen to wreak havoc, which happened several times. And each time it is a harrowing experience. That experience is greatly enhanced by the score. I know that in the previous episode I did about Little Women, I had mentioned the score in that, and how that was, I thought, the best score of the year. But since this came out in 2019 for Oscar contention, I think that the score by Thomas Newman is easily matches that score, in my opinion. There are a couple of really great moments where the music kind of takes over the film in a positive way, and brings you, pulls you into the story and into the feelings that the characters are experiencing. And that way, I think it is very effective. All the performances by our two main leads are both good, particularly George McKay. If you have, I've been aware of him. He's been in British films for several years now, and I've never seen him turn in a bad performance, and I'm going to include this one in here. He's very good. Dean Charles Chapman, also good. Even though it can be at times hard to separate him from his role in Game of Thrones, which is the only other thing I've seen him in, even though I'm sure he's been in other things. So yeah, between the directing, cinematography, acting, and music, I think this is a very strong film, one that I would suggest seeing on the biggest, loudest screen you can find in your area. There are some really incredible shots in here, some of the best actual cinematography that I've seen that doesn't involve entirely artificial scenes. So kudos to Roger Deakins. He is easily one of the best cinematographers working right now, and he definitely knows how to light a scene. So yeah, without further ado, I am going to give 1917 9.5 Clooney's. Definitely one of the best films of last year. Go ahead and see it now before the Oscars have been announced. It recently won Golden Globe. I think, though there are several films that could easily be in contention for that, I don't think anyone could argue that this one doesn't deserve to be in contention for the award season this year. Thank you for listening to the Moist Boys Reviews. Please check out the Moist Boys podcast. You can find out a bunch of cool stuff we're doing over there. Also, go head on over to the Patreon page, patreon.com/moistboyspodcast. We are also at Moist Boys Podcast on Instagram. We have all of our links there. We put up updates all the time, as well as at Moist Boys Pod on Twitter to stay up to date. Thank you for listening, and we'll get you next time.